We've been talking about it for a few weeks now, but Marvel Studios just upped the ante on the future projects with their presentation at D23 in Brazil this past weekend. Condense it and discuss, you say? Absolutely. Here we go. A brand new trailer was shown and released worldwide for Captain America Brave New World with a long look at the character of Isaiah Bradley. Hot off of those Red Hulk heels, a longer Thunderbolts trailer was released that really set a new tone for the film while still leaving us with questions. Also in trailer news, What If Season 3 got a spotlight this week, and the trailer Marvel release declares that this season is the end. The man, the myth, the legend himself, Kevin Feige, also teased attendees, and therefore all of us, with many more tantalizing nuggets, such as the character of Blade will reach the MCU, Queen of our hearts and minds, the Scarlet Witch, will likely return. Feige said the questions are when and how that will happen. Feige hopes that Miles Morales will enter the live-action MCU sometimes after the third animated Spider-Verse movie releases. And finally, the X-Men will, according to Feige, play a major role in the MCU after Secret Wars. It's been a long time since the excitement of El Capitan Theater, but does Feige now have us eating out of his hand?
Yeah, we've talked a lot about how 2025 is going to be jam-packed, and Feige did address that at D23. Somebody called him out on this, said, I thought you were rolling back production. Why are you sticking 9 MCU projects out into the world? And he essentially said, well, 2025 is different. We had a lot pushed back, and we had strikes, and we had reshoots and all of this. So 2025 is packed, but 2026 and on, that's where we'll start to really kind of wind it down a little bit. And I do believe him on that front. I think these projects, while we're all very excited for them, you do just have to realize that that is a lot of projects, and people aren't going to see them all, but you hope at least that the movies, the Captain America, the Thunderbolts, the Fantastic Four, that these really help move your franchise forward. So we did see these new trailers for Captain America and Thunderbolts. They didn't really show off a whole lot of new information. There weren't any big reveals that we didn't already know. But I'm really interested in, and this essentially connects back to what we were talking about a second ago, I'm really interested to see what the box office is going to look like for these movies, because to some degree they do feature characters and storylines that were built in part on Disney Plus. And that has been the conversation of how does the Disney Plus character translate to the big screen? And we know that it's not all Disney Plus. We know that Sam has obviously been on the movie screen. We know that Endgame ended with him getting the shield, but then you had this whole other story that was built off screen where he's accepting this role of Captain America. And then you have the same thing over with the Thunderbolts. Again, Yelena was on the screen, Bucky was on the screen, but you have a character like U.S. Agent, for example, like being built off screen during Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And it's just this really interesting conversation because we've seen a shadow of it. We saw Miss Marvel, for example, get built on the small screen and then make the jump to the big screen. And the Marvels, we all know how that box office went. It wasn't perfect, but still it's this idea of how does that work, right? Like how do we see these characters that you may or may not be familiar with, which again, Nish kind of talked about a second ago in the review. How is that going to translate to general audiences on the big screen? Can they watch these or feel like they're accessible even if they haven't seen it? Even if they haven't seen since Endgame and they know Chris Evans is not on the screen anymore and they see, oh, it's a new Captain America movie and there's Hulk, but he's red, and there's Captain America, but it's not Chris Evans. Like, are the general public going to feel open to be able to come and see that movie? And I think that's a question, right? I mean, that's an open question. And same with Thunderbolts, right? Like, there's a lot of characters here, and you may or may not recognize some of them. You recognize Bucky, and you might recognize, oh, that's the guy from Stranger Things, and oh, that's Florence Pugh. But then putting it all together, is that enough, right, to like push you into the seat if you're from the general audience? So I think it's a fascinating couple months ahead for Marvel Studios. I imagine Fantastic Four is sort of in another conversation because it's a very different property. Thunderbolts and Captain America are very similar in some ways. They have the grounded action, and I don't think in a perfect world Marvel Studios releases those two movies back to back because they do feel very similar, and I don't know if that will help or hurt either one, right, in the long run in terms of getting people to see the films. But But overall, that's the biggest takeaway for me was that, like, what is the future? We've just seen Deadpool and Wolverine this year. So, and we know how Deadpool and Wolverine smashed the box office. So it's just, what can we continue that momentum? You know, these are very different from Deadpool and Wolverine. So can we continue that momentum into a new year?
Speaking of your thoughts on the connection and these being built on Disney Plus, I think it's kind of the tale of two connections, because I think it's so interesting, because every little connection that you have to the MCU is in itself singular. Like there's no two connections between shows where you hand off between show and movie to movie to movie that is the same. It's always about how you decide to do it. And like something that I think works really well looking at these trailers, Sam Wilson is Captain America, right? The last time we saw him, he was handed the shield. If you only watched Endgame, I'm sorry. If you only watched Endgame, the last time you saw him, he was handed the shield by Steve Rogers. And Bucky says, "That's you, man. That's yours. It's not my shield." And that's like, so if you see him show up in this movie, he's the new Captain America. You do not need Falcon Winter Soldier to know that. But then in the Thunderbolts trailer, you've got the opposite problem. It's like you've got Dime Store Cap, John Walker saying, which I loved that call out in the trailer, but him saying, "Bucky?" Like, how does this fake Dime Store Cap know anything about Bucky? Like, there's a weird disconnect there if you only jump from Endgame to this, you know? But I think I'm hoping that they will do enough in these movies to bring those people along, because I know we just talked about this, and I think Niche is totally right in his feedback, in his 5-star review, which is like, I really think they need to find ways to creatively put these characters in situations without advancing the character so far that they're unrecognizable to audiences when they come back, you know, from their TV trips.
Yeah, well, I'll start by addressing the update that we got on Blade, which I felt was so needed. But I wonder about the timing. Should they have done this in closer proximity to taking it off the calendar? And it could have gone either way. Maybe that would have created a scenario where it's like, oh, doth he protest too much? You know, is this an actual thing here? But it also was kind of like, it sucked because it was the butt of a joke. Like, even like, you know, happy Deadpool and Wolverine Day to everybody. But again, that movie had the joke, there's only going to be one Blade. And, you know, you have Wesley Snipes and Deadpool looking right at the camera there. So all that being said, the comments, while it does double down and reaffirm that we're going to get Blade in the MCU, they are a little cagey still. They're not very specific. It doesn't say it's going to be the Mahershala Ali version of Blade. It doesn't say that it's going to be, you know, the version of the movie that's been worked on for so long up until this point. So a lot remains to be seen there. Outside of that, I do want to come back to some of the trailer talk there, because Jay, you mentioned that you didn't think there were a lot of reveals, and that may be true, but for my purposes, looking at that Thunderbolts trailer, I thought it might have been obvious in the last trailer we got, but I felt like we got official confirmation that Val purchased the Avengers Tower. Like, there was dialogue saying, you know,
for sure,
look at the view, think about the battles that have taken place here. So Thunderbolts continues to be the one that I am the most excited for. Even with Fantastic Four in the mix, I'm really excited for Fantastic Four and what that's going to look like. But Thunderbolts, it's the best of both worlds for me. It's doing something new, but also kind of satisfying that itch for that connectivity and the return of characters that we've been talking about here. So, and we know that one's going to be a good mix of some action with some comedy. We know that Red Guardian's going to be a comedic character. Bob seems like he's going to be the source of a lot of comedic relief there too. But I will say, I didn't love the joke that we got in the car where Red Guardian goes to enact, you know, defensive maneuvers, and it's Genuine's pony. It just didn't work for me. So I'm hoping gags like that are kind of few and far between, because, you know, people complain about the Marvel brand of comedy where it just kind of like takes you out. And I've never really been a proponent of that argument. I've never really felt it, but that joke in particular was just like, yeah, this doesn't feel like it fits the scene all that well for me. So
I said this on the MCU cast, but just to address that, I think that this trailer edited that scene in a not very good light. You can tell that the jokes are coming more rapid fire than they do in the scene. Like the editing, there's music pumping behind it, and it's sort of like it kind of goes from joke to joke to joke. And I think the overall tone is seeming like from that trailer, like this is going to be a little too jokey. And I think I think they are avoiding some of the quieter moments in that car where they're talking about other things or they're whatever. That could happen that thing with the pony could happen way before or way after. What, you know, it just depends. Like, it just seemed to me like they truncated that scene in a way that didn't, I think, work. Okay. Like, and that's a trailer edit. I think in the movie it might work better. I like the pony thing. I just have a love for Genuine, and I love that song.
I was going to say, you always get me with a pony needle drop. Like,
yeah,
I'm
me
sorry.
Too.
Fair enough.
Me too.
Enough. I've probably seen one too many bad karaoke renditions that have soured me on it.
Well, that's because you haven't seen me do it.
I guess
and I was definitely like gyrating in my chair as soon as that hit. You know, I loved it, man.
Yeah, clearly you never danced at a middle school dance to Genuine and didn't listen to the lyrics until years later. You know, and then went, wait a minute, I was in 6th grade dancing to this.
I was an adult learning that song to play it when I realized he says, "If you're horny, let's do it." It is so close, because later in the song he says, jump on it, let's do it. But at the beginning of each chorus, he says, if you're horny, let's do it. But it sounds, the way he phrases it, he goes, if you're horny, and it sounds so like, jump on it. And like, I for years did not hear if you're horny. And it was like years later till I realized. Sorry. What about you, Haley? We've been talking about
I'm just thinking, like, clearly Scotty didn't grow up in the hood like the rest of us did, because we're all like, oh, yeah.
No, listen. Pony is from the hood to the holler. It's everywhere, clearly.
It's universal.
Jay Scotty just missed out.
I'm in the hood in a universal way. In the club, we all love the pony. I also loved the Thunderbolts trailer. I actually thought that the jokes were more, yes, but I felt like this very kind of malicious sort of undertone to the things that are going on in the movie. And so the first teaser was all jokes. This one was jokes. And then you kind of get this uneasiness that's going on. They've cut it to make it look like Bucky is on Val's leash in a way. And I wonder if that's really true or not. So I'm really excited for that movie. But then the internet just is abuzz with Scarlet Witch will return. I mean, that's all but Kevin Feige confirming that she will be back. Does that mean it will be Elizabeth Olsen? We hope so, but we don't know. I really hold on to that Vision series that's going to come out, and the Vision and the Scarlet Witch, like, that's, you go back in comics and there's lots and lots and lots of them in comics together, and it kind of feels like they just are two halves of a whole, literally and figuratively, that you want to see on the screen together. So I think like a Vision series with just maybe the twins isn't super compelling, but a Vision series with the twins and maybe we get a Scarlet Witch is really exciting. So I'm looking forward to that. And then the third thing that really stuck out to me was the Miles Morales hope for live action, because talking about new entry points to franchises, I think that would bring a ton of fresh new people to the franchise who are followers of that character, who is really beloved and really popular. And I just think that'll be a great handoff from Tom Holland Spider-Man to Miles Morales. So yeah, lots of exciting things.
When we know the Young Avengers are being built quietly in the background, we've already seen Miss Marvel reach out to Kate Bishop. I mean, could you imagine a movie with Miles Morales and Haley Steinfeld as Kate Bishop and Miss Marvel, and then you're pulling in any other random Young Avengers you want to pull in? You're pulling in Joe Locke as Wiccan. I mean, that would really be a huge film, right? If you can get Miles Morales brought into that sort of team-up thing. We saw that worked with Spider-Man, right? Like getting Spider-Man introduced in a team-up movie really blew Civil War up. I mean, it was the height of the MCU already, but the fact that we knew, all right, Spider-Man is coming into this franchise in this movie, and then he's going to get his own live-action movie afterwards. It was a really exciting time. And so I can kind of see a similar approach here with Miles Morales. Like, what if we brought him into a Young Avengers movie as a side character and then gave him his own movie afterwards, set in the MCU, just like we did with Tom Holland? Sony's got to sign up for something like that, I would imagine, with that character. They've seen the success that in Marvel specifically has had with Tom Holland's Spider-Man.
Sure. Yeah. Speaking of, you were talking about Haley, Wanda and Vision returning and the Vision series, I can't believe we're getting White Vision in What If.
Yeah.
I know it won't be the same version, clearly, because it's What If. Like, what if White Vision did something else? But we've been so curious about where he is, what's going on, and we're going to get an alternate version of that in the What If series, which is just super exciting. It's so weird. I was so shocked when I'd seen him, but I didn't register. And then me and Jay Scotty were doing the trailer breakdown, and I was just getting through, and I was like, wait, that means we're going to get more White Vision. Crazy. What? Here of all places? It's cool. It's really cool.
They're like, we didn't forget, did you?
Yeah.
They're like, look, Avengers Tower, we got a plan. White Vision, we got a plan. Like, we heard everything you were saying. Just calm down.
Yep. Kate Bishop, we got a plan. Like, all this stuff that What If really is like this place where, like, okay, there are people at Marvel paying attention to all the stuff that they're dropping and not remembering or not pulling back in. We're going to get all this stuff back at some point.
Yeah. Well, at the mention of What If Season 3 and quote-unquote plans within plans, sorry, I'm confusing franchises here, but I do think it's important to address Feige's comments about the X-Men, because, we saw X-Men in the What If trailer, and we saw them in Deadpool and Wolverine. It seems like they're going to factor in. So the fact that he says they're going to be a big thing after Secret Wars, I still have the expectation that we're going to see plenty of X-Men in Secret Wars, because why wouldn't you? But that does make me think that it's probably going to be past iterations, more Fox versions of these characters. Maybe some, in the case of Channing Tatum, some wish fulfillment, some characters that, never were. But then after Secret Wars, we are going to start fresh with like a brand new Marvel Studios version of the X-Men. At least that's what I'm extrapolating here.
I was going to say, I will probably have been right about my 10 years call with the X-Men.
Yeah, we're getting closer and closer.
I'm not right about much. I will be right about that.
Well, the way he phrased it, too, if I remember correctly, because we covered this on MCU Cast yesterday, too. The way he phrased the quote, it didn't necessarily say only after. It was like after and maybe during Secret Wars or something like that. Sure. Like, either before or after Secret Wars, they will be a big thing. And I think it's sort of like playing coy with the idea that like they're probably going to be a big thing during, but he's not guaranteeing that. Just trying to keep us on not knowing everything, which I like. I love it. Don't tell me everything. Lie to me. Lie to me.
I know we've been talking about this one for a while, but I'm sorry, I want to go back to the trailers for a second just to give some call outs to some musical stuff. In the Thunderbolts trailer, who was it that said it seemed like Bucky might be on Val's leash? Or the way at least it was cut. Haley, credit where credit's due. I did notice the score there. It sounded very much like Alan Silvestri's Avengers theme, but it was tweaked a little bit. So really appreciated that. Great moment there. But what really stuck out to me with the Brave New World trailer, and I think they've been doing it all along, but it just really resonated with me this time, is with the editing, they do this kind of like and I would just describe it as like tactical. It sounds like, guns being reloaded, kind of like a timer or somebody like suiting up.
It feels like a clock to me.
It works really well. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. They have had that in other trailers, especially like the prison scene where he goes to visit Isaiah and sort of like it's just good and intriguing. Like what's going on.
Yeah. And I love the Marvel Studios logo, but it's cool to see just like Marvel in like white font with a black background, just kind of like almost like a title card. Like seeing those types of change ups from the tradition a little bit, I think was kind of cool.
I'd say both of the trailers, we're talking about music and sound a lot, but like they're both cut extremely well, where the action is hitting all the beats of the music and the sounds, and that's just very effective marketing when you're doing action trailers especially. And I remember way back in the day, Matt, you and Jeff talking about Captain Marvel and that her big fight scene doesn't hit on the needle drops, and these trailers are like turned up to 1,000,000 with that, and I think it's awesome.
Sure.
It gets my blood pumping. I'm like, let's go.
It's like since Edgar Wright has done what he's done, I feel like if you have a needle drop and you don't edit to the beat like you should, like it's just not working. Like we've moved past needle drops that don't like edit well with the beat. Like just you got to design your action. You got to design, if you're gonna use a needle drop, like make it work. And I think of Edgar Wright in a lot of things. He gets a lot of credit for Baby Driver, but if you go all the way back to Shaun of the Dead and like some of those scenes where he's like the "Don't Stop Me Now" scene where they're all like rhythmically hitting the zombies, dun, 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 it's so good.